Hello. How's everyone doing? Just gonna try to prop up my phone here at an advantageous angle. Need my little buddy to help me again. Hey. And hopefully this is a boring video, because hopefully I'll just read. It's not really helping much, are you? Stay still. Okay, 1 second. Cut. Action. Reading through Measure for Measure. Hopefully it's boring, because I intend to just simply read it like I was supposed to originally. And hold any commentary I may or may not have till the end of this essay, finally. On the theme of humane versus legal justice. Okay. Although we cannot believe that Shakespeare abdicated his place as practical playwright and took upon himself the role of professor of ethics in Measure for Measure, clearly moral and ethical problems engaged his serious interest. The problem that is uppermost in the author's mind, as he portrays moral conditions in Vienna and the Duke's curious methods of writing them, is the conflict between the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. Okay, just a refresher here. He is profoundly concerned with the impact upon human beings of abstract justice when the rigors of the law are applied by a zealot. This problem was no theoretical proposition for academic discussions, but something very real in Shakespeare's as well as every man's experience. Claudio's situation may have reminded the author of the circumstances of his own marriage. Certainly he was not dealing with abstractions in this treatment of human frailties and the laws concerning sexual behavior. Implicit in the characterization and action of the play is a plea for tolerance and understanding of the nature of human emotions, whatever may be the stern provisions of the Mosaic Code, the imagined code of the Dramatist Vienna. It is, in its efforts to regulate sexual behavior, humane justice requires the application of mercy, the forgiveness vouchsafed by the New Testament. Shakespeare is saying. He is also voicing his contempt for the hypocrisy of the Pharisees and all the hosts of the self-righteous who find it easy to condemn others for sins they themselves secretly practice. A brilliant essay on the meaning of Measure for Measure, delivered in 1937. As a British Academy lecture by R.W. Chambers under the title The Jacobean Shakespeare and Measure for Measure, refutes the notion that the play is an expression of disillusionment and cynicism, and argues that it is an expression of Shakespeare's recognition of certain tenets of Christian doctrine and Christian charity, as revealed in the New Testament. In Measure for Measure, Chambers asserts, Shakespeare reveals that there are things more important for oneself and for others than avoiding death and pain. And he quotes 2 lines of a Chinese poem that he believes also illustrates the spirit of the play. Quote, "It is better to be a crystal and to be broken than to remain perfect like a tile upon the housetop." Whether one agrees with Chambers that Measure for Measure is a play of forgiveness, expressing the Christianity of the New Testament, one does not need to go to the other extreme and agree with the 19th century critics who saw in it only evil. It is serious and often solemn, but it portrays human beings as they frequently are, not as moral lectures might like to have them. In the interplay of these characters with all of their frailties, Shakespeare managed to reveal his own concept of justice tempered with mercy, a justice adapted to the necessities of human beings, who must ever remain a little lower than the angels, and hence not capable of that perfection of behavior demanded by purists who cannot themselves live according to the stern code which they would apply to others. There's a nice little decal here for a new one watching. Next section, source, date, and history. Being very thorough, aren't I? Just one small anecdote, which is I remember when reading this in college and discussing it around a table with fellow students. A question was raised about the use of the word Christian, and I made something of a fool of myself by saying that it was coterminous, synonymous with that of the good. To be Christian is to be Christ-like, is to be like Christ, who is all good. Therefore, Shakespeare's employment of the term Christian somewhere in the play, I maintained at the time, circa 2010, 11 years ago, that Christian meant good, and I stand by that term, that opinion, I guess, until maybe when I get to that part of the play, I'll see the nuance that others were looking for. But I remember feeling at the time these same forces that the author here is mentioning, that there's an attempt to see cynicism in this play, but there is none. Anyway, source, date, and history. The immediate source of Measure for Measure is a play by George Whetstone, published in 2 parts in 1578 as Promos and Cassandra. Whether the play was acted on at any stage is uncertain. Whetstone revamped the material and published it as a tale in his collection of stories, the Heptameron, from 1582. He took his plot from a story in Giraldi Cinthio's collection of novellas, the Hecatomithi, from 1565. Cinthio also used the same plot in a play of his own, Aptitya, printed in 1583. A situation somewhat like the essential plot is said to have occurred in Milan in 1547. So it's loosely based on history, it seems, this play. When Fernando Gonzaga, governor of the province, left control in the hands of a deputy and pretended to disappear. The fact that this story has some historical basis lends some credence to the author's previous remarks and my remarks atop those. Next paragraph. A few scholars have attempted to show that Shakespeare's play is a recast of one by another's hand, but no clear evidence supports this theory. So I'm saying it's a reboot, but I guess there's scant evidence of that. Others have argued that the play shows the handiwork of some collaborator, but no evidence exists for this view either, except certain passages that Shakespeare's idolaters think too prosy and uninspired for him to have written, which gets back to the author's previous point about these plays making money as entertainment, and although certain passages might seem to fall short of Shakespeare's ordinarily deft skill, that may just as well have to do with real business urges to pander to lower elements in the peanut gallery of the day. Next paragraph. The play was performed at court before King James on December 26th, 1604. This may have been the first performance. What sort of popular reception Measure for Measure had in the public playhouse, we do not know, but it has kept alive over the centuries the law against lovers. Centuries. It has been kept alive over the centuries. An adaptation made by Sir William Davenant called The Law Against Lovers was performed several times between 1661 and 1665. Another adaptation, an operatic version made by Charles Gildon, entitled Measure for Measure, or Beauty the Best Advocate, had a run of several years at the turn of the 17th century and was still being performed as late as 1706. The 18th century saw several revivals of Measure for Measure at Drury Lane and later at Covent Garden. It was revived at intervals throughout the 19th century and has enjoyed a number of revivals in this century, 20th. Its somewhat tortured lines and its dark plot have given this play a certain amount of acclaim in recent years from both American and English critics, who find in it expressions that appeal to their sense of the spirit of our times. No quarto version of Measure for Measure was printed in the 17th century, and the only text is that of the first folio in 1623. The folio text is the basis of the present edition, with some emendations that have been generally accepted. The folio text of this play is more corrupt and less satisfactory than any that appear in that edition. Next section, the author. This might be the final section. Let's see, yeah. Overdoing a little bit. If I get to the rest of the play and anybody finds this series later, feel free to fast forward, I suppose. It's pretty dry, but I'm personally interested in becoming acquainted with all history before I read. The author. As early as 1598, Shakespeare was so well known as a literary and dramatic craftsman that Francis Meres, in his Palladius Tamia, Wit's Treasury, referred in flattering terms to him as a mellifluous and honey-tongued Shakespeare, famous for his Venus and Adonis, his Lucrece, and his sugared sonnets, which were circulating among his private friends. Meres observes further that as Plautus and Seneca are accounted the best for comedy and tragedy among the Latins, so Shakespeare among the English is the most excellent in both kinds for the stage, and he mentions a dozen plays that had made a name for Shakespeare. He concludes with the remark that the Muses would speak with Shakespeare's fine filed phrase if they would speak English. To those acquainted with the history of the Elizabethan and Jacobean periods, it is incredible that anyone should be so naive or ignorant as to doubt the reality of Shakespeare as the author of the plays that bear his name. Yet so much nonsense has been written about other candidates for the plays that it is well to remind readers that no credible evidence that would stand up in a court of law has ever been adduced to prove either that Shakespeare did not write his plays or that anyone else wrote them. All the theories offered for the authorship of Francis Bacon, the Earl of Derby, the Earl of Oxford, the Earl of Hertford, Christopher Marlowe, and a score of other candidates are mere conjectures spun from the active imaginations of persons who confuse hypothesis and conjecture with evidence. I got into an argument once with the jokel Ken J-Man this topic. I'm glad I have such authoritative sources as whoever this guy is to back me. Take that, Ken. Anyway, as Meres' statement of 1598 indicates, Shakespeare was already a popular playwright whose name carried weight at the box office, as it were. The obvious reputation of Shakespeare as early as 1598 makes the effort to prove him a myth one of the most absurd in the history of human perversity. ha. On guard, all foul meddlers with true history. The anti-Shakespeareans talk darkly about a plot of vested interest to maintain the authorship of Shakespeare. Nobody has any vested interest in Shakespeare, but every scholar is interested in the truth and in the quality of evidence advanced by special pleaders who set forth hypotheses in place of facts. The anti-Shakespeareans base their arguments upon a few simple premises, all of them false. These false premises are that Shakespeare was an unlettered yokel without any schooling, that nothing is known about Shakespeare, and that only a noble lord or the equivalent in background could have written the plays. Balderdash. The facts are that more is known about Shakespeare than about most dramatists of his day, that he had a very good education acquired in the Stratford Grammar School, and that the plays show no evidence of profound book learning, and that the knowledge of kings and courts evident in the plays is no greater than any intelligent young man could have picked up at second hand. I think I'm about as educated in the modern day as Shakespeare would have been in his. This leads me to believe. Most anti-Shakespeareans are naive and betray an obvious snobbery. The author of their favorite plays, they imply, must have had a college diploma framed and hung in his study wall, like the one in their dentist's office. And obviously so great a writer must have had a title or some equally significant evidence of exalted social background. They forget that genius has a way of cropping up in unexpected places, and that none of the great creative writers of the world got his inspiration in a college or university course. Amen to that. William Shakespeare was the son of John Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon, a substantial citizen of that small but busy market town in the center of the rich agricultural county of Warwick. John Shakespeare kept a shop, what we would call a general store. He dealt in wool and other produce, and gradually acquired property. As a youth, John Shakespeare had learned the trade of glover and leather worker. There is no contemporary evidence that the elder Shakespeare was a butcher, though the anti-Shakespeareans like to talk about the ignorant butcher's boy of Stratford. What swine! Their only evidence is a statement by gossipy John Aubrey, more than a century after Shakespeare's birth, that young William followed his father's trade, and when he killed a calf, he would do it in a high style and make a speech. We would like to believe the story true, but Aubrey is not a very credible witness. John Shakespeare probably continued to operate a farm in Snitterfield, that his father had leased. He married Mary Arden, daughter of his father's landlord, a man of some property. The third of their 8 children was William, baptized on April 26th, 1564, and probably born 3 days before. At least it is conventional to celebrate April 23rd as his birthday. The Stratford record, I find this interesting. I don't know if anybody else does. The Stratford records give considerable information about John Shakespeare. We know that he held several municipal offices, including those of alderman and mayor. In 1580, he was in some sort of legal difficulty and was fined for neglecting a summons to the Court of Queen's Bench, requiring him to appear at Westminster and be bound over to keep the peace. As a citizen and alderman of Stratford, John Shakespeare was entitled to send his son to the grammar school free. Though the records are lost, there can be no reason to doubt that this is where young William received his education. As any student of the period knows, the grammar schools provided the basic education in Latin learning and literature. The Elizabethan grammar school is not to be confused with modern grammar schools. Indeed, many cultivated men of the day received all their formal education in the grammar schools. At the universities in this period, a student would have received little training that would have inspired him to be a creative writer. At Stratford, young Shakespeare would have acquired a familiarity with Latin and some little knowledge of Greek. He would have read Latin authors and become acquainted with the plays of Plautus and Terence. Undoubtedly, in this period of his life, he received that stimulation to read and explore for himself the world of ancient and modern history, which he later utilized in his plays. The youngster who does not acquire the type of intellectual curiosity before college days rarely develops as a result of a college course the kind of mind Shakespeare demonstrated. His learning in books was anything but profound, but he clearly had the probing curiosity that sent him in search of information, and he had a keenness in the observation of nature and of humankind that finds reflection in his poetry. There is little documentation for Shakespeare's boyhood. There is little reason why there should be. Nobody knew that he was going to be a dramatist about whom any scrap of information would be prized in the centuries to come. He was merely an active and vigorous youth of Stratford, perhaps assisting his father in his business, and no Boswell bothered to write down facts about him. The most important record that we have is a marriage license issued by the Bishop of Worcester on November 27th, 1582, to permit William Shakespeare to marry Anne Hathaway, 7 or 8 years his senior. Furthermore, the bishop permitted the marriage after reading the bans, only once insisted of 3 times, evidence of the desire for haste. The need was explained on May 26, 1583, when the christening of Susanna, daughter of William and Anne Shakespeare, was recorded at Stratford. 2 years later, on February 2nd, 1585, the records show the births of twins to the Shakespeares, a boy and a girl, who were christened Hamnet and Judith. What William Shakespeare was doing in Stratford during the early years of his married life, or when he went to London, we do not know. It has been conjectured that he tried his hand at school teaching, but that is a mere guess. There is a legend that he left Stratford to escape the charge of poaching in the park of Sir Thomas Lucy of Charlecote, but there is no proof of this. There is also a legend that when first he came to London, he received his living by holding horses outside a playhouse, and presently was given employment inside, but there is nothing better than 18th century hearsay for this. How Shakespeare broke into the London theatres as a dramatist and actor, we do not know. But lack of information is not surprising, for Elizabethans did not write their autobiographies, and we know even less about the lives of many writers and some men of affairs than we know about Shakespeare. By 1592 he was so well established and popular that he incurred the envy of the dramatist and pamphleteer Robert Greene, who referred to him as an upstart crow, in his own conceit the only Shake seen in a country. People regarded him as arrogant, it seems. From this time onward, contemporary allusions and references in legal documents enable the scholar to chart Shakespeare's career with greater accuracy than is possible with most other Elizabethan dramatists. Much longer is this essay? Trying to remember my Roman numerals here. 23 to 44. 21 more pages. Maybe I'll skip ahead now to just the first scene of the play, see what we're dealing with. Act 1, Scene 1. An apartment in the Duke's palace. Enter Duke, Escalus, lords, and attendants. I guess when I'm Duke, I'll speak like a Duke. When I'm Escalus, I'll speak like Escalus. Try to make it clear. Aeschylus. My lord, of government and properties to unfold would seem in me to affect speech and discourse, since I am put to know that your own science exceeds in that the lists of all advice my strength can give you. Then no more remains but that to your sufficiency as your worth is able, and let them work. The nature of our people, our city's institutions, and the terms for common justice, are as pregnant in as art and practice hath enriched any that we remember. There is our commission, from which we would not have you warp. Call hither, I say, bid come before us Angelo. Exit an attendant. What figure of us think you he will bear? For you must know, we have with special soul elected him our absence to supply, lend him our terror, dressed him with our love, and give his deputation all the organs of our own power. What think you of it? If any in Vienna be of worth to undergo such ample grace and honour, it is Lord Angelo. Enter Angelo. Look where he comes. Always obedient to your grace's will, I come to know your pleasure. Angelo, there is a kind of character in thy life that to the observer doth thy history fully unfold. Thyself and thy belongings are not thine own, so proper as to waste thyself upon thy virtues. They on thee. Heaven doth with us as we with torches do, not light them for themselves, for if our virtue did not go forth of us, 'twere all alike, as if we had them not. Spirits are not finely touched but to find issues, nor nature never lends the smallest scruple of her excellence, but like a thrifty goddess, she determines herself the glory of a creditor, both thanks and use. But I do bend my speech to one that can my part in him advertise. Hold therefore, Angelo, in our remove be thou at full ourself. Mortality and mercy and Vienna live in thy tongue and heart. Old Aeschylus, though first in question, is thy secondary. Take thy commission. No, good my lord, let there be some more test made of my metal, before so noble and so great a figure be stamped upon it. No more evasion. We have with a leavened and prepared choice proceeded to you, therefore take your honours. Our haste from hence is of so quick condition that it prefers itself and leaves unquestioned matters of needful value. We shall write to you as time and our concerning shall importune how it goes with us, and do look to know what doth befall you here. So fare you well. To the hopeful execution do I leave you of your commissions. Yet give leave, my lord, that we may bring you something on the way. My haste may not admit it, nor need you, on mine honour, have to do with any scruple. Your scope is as mine own, so to enforce or qualify the laws as to your soul seems good. Give me your hand. I'll privily away. I love the people, but do not like to stage me on their eyes. Though it do well, I do not relish well. Their loud applause and aves vehement, nor do I think the man of safe discretion that does affect it once more. Fare you well. The heavens give safety to your purposes. Lead forth and bring you back in happiness. I thank you. Fare you well. Exit. I shall desire you, sir, to give me leave, to have free speech with you, and it concerns me to look into the bottom of my place. A power I have, but of what strength and nature I am not yet instructed. 'Tis so with me. Let us withdraw together, and we may soon our satisfaction have touching that point. I'll wait upon your honour. Exeunt. So, some intrigue is afoot. Let me pause the video and try to get heads or tails of what's going on. This may be of use. Introduction. I console my own lack of comprehension with this line here. Evidently a line or part of one has been lost in this passage, since the phrasing seems cryptic and elliptical. Talking about from 3 to 9, of government and properties to unfold, would seem in me the effect speech and discourse, since I am put to know that your own science exceeds in that the list of all advice, etc. But the meaning, it says, in this cryptic passage may be paraphrased, quote, "For me to describe the characteristics of government would be mere oratory, since I am aware that your knowledge of the subject surpasses my ability to advise you. I need only give you the necessary authority and leave you to exercise it in accordance with your abilities." Well, let me reread it. Of government, the properties, I'm going to try a little bit more rapid this time, but still low, because he's the Duke. Duke Vincenzio, ruler of Vienna. And he's here revealing to Lord Aeschylus his plan to leave the government of the city in the hands of Lord Angelo, with Aeschylus as his assistant, while he himself, so he wants Aeschylus to be kind of his eyes and ears, as he leaves for Vienna. Angelo is modestly reluctant to assume the responsibility, but the Duke insists that Angelo's virtues qualify him to rule the full. So anyway, vis-a-vis the oratory, it being mere oratory, and that he knows better than even the Duke does. So, Aeschylus, my lord, of government the properties to unfold would seem in me the effect speech and discourse, since I am put to know that your own science exceeds in that the list of all advice my strength can give you. Then no more remains but that to your sufficiency, as your worth is able, and let them work. The nature of our people, our city's institutions, and the terms for common justice are as pregnant as art and practice hath enriched any that we remember. There is our commission, from which we would not have you warp. Call hither, I say. Bid come before us, Angelo. Then the attendant gets Angelo, and Angelo is not there yet. Says, what figure of us think you he will bear? For you must know we have with special soul elected him our absence to supply, lent him our terror, dressed him with our love, and given his deputation all the organs of our own power. What think you of it? This vesting of all of our terror and authority. Aeschylus, right-hand man. If any in Vienna be of worth to undergo such ample grace and honour, it is Lord Angelo. Enter Angelo. Look where he comes. Angelo. Always obedient to your grace's will, I come to know your pleasure. They gave it something. Angelo, there is a kind of character in thy life that to the observer doth thy history fully unfold. Thyself and thy belongings are not thine own so proper as to waste thyself upon thy virtues. They on thee. Heaven doth with us as we with torches do, not light them for themselves, for if our virtues did not give forth of us, 'twere all alike as if we had them not. Spirits are not finely touched, but to fine issues. Nor nature never lends the smallest scruple of her excellence, but like a thrifty goddess, she undermines herself the glory of a creditor, or she determines herself the glory of a creditor. Both thanks and use. But I do bend my speech to one that can my part in him advertise. Hold therefore, Angelo. In our remove be thou at full ourself, mortality and mercy and Vienna. Live in thy tongue and heart. Old Aeschylus, though first in question, is thy secondary. Take thy commission. Angelo. Now, good my lord, let there be some mere test made of my metal, before so noble and so great a figure be stamped upon it. No more evasion. We have with a leavened and prepared choice proceeded to you. Therefore take your honours. Our haste from hence is of so quick condition that it prefers itself and leaves unquestioned matters of needful value. We shall write to you, as time and our concerning shall importune, how it goes with us. And do look to know what doth befall you here. So fare you well. To the hopeful execution do I leave you of your commissions. Yet give leave, my lord, that we may bring you something on the way. Duke, my haste may not admit it, nor need you on mine honour to have to do with any scruple. Your scope is as mine own, so to enforce or qualify the law as to your soul seems good. Give me your hand. I'll privily away. I love the people, but do not like this I love the people, but do not like to stage me to their eyes. Though it do well, I do not relish well their loud applause and aves vehement, nor do I think the man of safe discretion that does affect it. Once more, fare you well. He's saying, like, what, you want me to have a parade? No way, Jose. Angelo. The heavens give safety to your purposes. Aeschylus. Lead forth and lead forth and bring you back in happiness. I thank you. Fare you well. Exit the Duke. Aeschylus. I shall desire you, sir, to give me leave to have free speech with you, and it concerns me to look into the bottom of my plays. A power I have, but of what strength and nature I am not yet instructed. Angelo. 'Tis so with me. Let us withdraw together, and we may soon our satisfaction have touching that point. I'll wait upon your honour. Exeunt. So, I think I'll stop reading for this video, but lessons learned. You don't know what's going on in a scene. The first time I read through that scene, I was just reading it with no knowledge. And the language is such, it's hard to understand the plot at the first go. And so I think I imputed more intrigue and even a little bit of malice than the text itself justifies. The second read through it, although not great, I think adhered more carefully and directly to the plot of the play. Which leads me to conjecture that the critics that the author of the essay Humane versus Legal Justice, which I hope to return to, maybe just once I get to a passage that seems worth reading aloud, I conjecture that those who read this play in a more cynical light than it ought to are doing more so what I did on the first read through, and what I corrected after reading the summary and going to do a second run. As I continue to read this play, I'm going to maybe have to reread passages in order to stay mindful of the appropriate tone to strike, even if I don't do a fantastic job of rendering it all. And it's perfect tone. I hope to at least do an adequate job of making the plot and meaning of each scene clear by subsequent or explanation, if not through the performative act of reading it aloud itself. Anyway, that's Measure for Measure Part 3.